Hello and welcome to a very special one-off podcast where I have gathered together some of the brightest minds in the whole of the galaxy to discuss the state of Star Wars. So please join me as we embark on this mission, because these are the geeks you're looking for. So good evening, guys. Thank you very much for joining me. Please welcome to everybody that's listening to your local anti-hero and the fabulous duo of Erratic Ermine, Nathan and Caroline. Say hi, guys.
Hey, guys.
Hey, it's your boy.
So we have all got together just a few days before the release of The Mandalorian and roughly about 6 weeks ahead of the release of the final part of the Skywalker saga to have a little bit of a chit chat about Star Wars. And it's going to be covering our background and, you know, where we come from in relation to how we got into this fandom, and also what's happened so far, you know, what we've seen unfold with the films, the TV shows, the expanded universe, things like that, the games. Then we'll talk a little bit about the upcoming things. So we'll talk a bit about The Mandalorian and Rise of Skywalker based on the last trailers that have come out, before finishing off with a look ahead into what we may think is coming in relation to this universe, this world of Star Wars fandom, and what people have got lined up for us. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. So guys, let's talk about Star Wars. So firstly, give credit. A lot of this has got to go to Nathan, because a little while back on a little podcast that maybe some of you are familiar with called Talking TV with My Mum, I talked a little bit about The Last Jedi. And some of the comments I made were seen as quite divisive by somebody who decided to say something in the comments, which then made me decide.
That's what comments are for, Dom.
It made me think perhaps we need to have a conversation about this. Maybe we need to talk a little bit about Star Wars. And that was the genesis of this little project. And we've been sort of trying to get it together, and we have to give an honorable mention to our fallen brethren that wasn't able to join us, because Who is Skippy was supposed to be a part of this.
Yeah, press F to pay respects, everybody.
So pour one out.
I want to see the comments blowing up with Fs.
Yeah, F's in the chat, and pour one out for our fallen homie. Because Skippy really wanted to be a part of this, but scheduling issues, you know, he comes from obviously hell itself, you know, the country full of everything that wants to kill you, and
true that
the time difference is a bit of a pain, and he works a job that just means that it's really difficult pinning him down to get to do stuff like this. So you're with us in spirit, Skippy, because I know you're going to be listening to this, mate. So
can we get a Force Ghost of Skippy?
Oh yeah, I'll see what I can do in the edit. I'll see if I can get something in there image wise.
That's Craig.
Yeah, Craig, our recording software is acting the part of Skippy this evening.
All hail Craig.
So guys, let's talk about our background. So we'll start with you, Jesse. So what's your background with Star Wars?
Oh man, you know, I had wrote something down for this. This is the biggest moment in my career, and I wanted to make an impression. But I had to use it as toilet paper earlier, so I'm just gonna like free rhyme. Man, I don't know. I started watching. I honestly can't remember when I actually started watching Star Wars. My mom introduced me to the original trilogy when I was really young, probably before I was even 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a lot of people hate on it for no reason, but like I was a big fan of the Phantom Menace, of the sequel trilogy, man. Those were good movies, and I don't know why people hate on them, but those were the movies growing up, man. I had all the action figures. I was a huge fan, played all the games. And let's see. The Clone Wars obviously was about the time I was getting into, I don't know, probably like my early teen, like my tween years, like 11 or 12, something like that.
Yep.
So I watched that all the way through, and that was really, I fell off. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot coming out after that between then and when I was an adult. But I mean, honestly, that's about it. I mean, it was part of my family had that nerd culture, and I was raised on it, dude.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. And same question then to you guys, Nathan and Caroline.
Well, and I'll let ladies go first.
Mhm.
Same as you, Jesse. Mine, I kind of don't even remember when I started watching Star Wars, when I got into it. I just know that from a very early age, my grandfather had the original trilogy on VHS. And whenever I went over to his house, I'd be like, oh, put this one on. And I'd point at the one with Yoda on it because I really liked Yoda. I didn't really watch any of the prequels because I didn't really know about them at the time. My dad and my grandfather just weren't interested in them because they were new, so it never was really brought up to me. But I remember seeing Jar Jar Binks and being like, oh, that looks different. Okay. And I kind of missed like the height of the Clone Wars being on TV because I was in my edgy anime phase. So then some weird stuff with relationship-wise. An ex of mine watched the original trilogy with another girl, and it really tore me up. So I was like, I don't like Star Wars anymore. It reminds me of that time. And then I met Nathan here, and he was like, oh, you got to watch it again. Because I hadn't seen it since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And we watched all of it together, like the original trilogy, the prequel, and right around then The Force Awakens came out, and we just binged it. And it was incredible. It was like a reawakening. So I just am so psyched to be sort of experiencing everything now as like a new series of Clone Wars is coming out, The Mandalorian, this new finale. It's really neat.
Cool. Okay. Nathan?
All right, buckle in, because where everyone else has been like, hey, it's a pretty direct route, we're going to take some dips and curves.
Take us on the journey. Come on, then.
Right, so my first memory of Star Wars is I was about 10 years old, and I went over to a friend's house and spent the night, and he was like, oh, I got to show you this super awesome fight scene from Star Wars. I'm like, all right, cool. With the space swords, right? And he's like, yeah, lightsabers. I'm like, okay, space swords, that's cool. And so he pulls up, the fight between Yoda and Count Dooku at the end of episode 2, and I just watched it and I was like, so wait, who's this frog guy? I mean, like, yeah, he's little and that's cool. I mean, like, I guess that's cool. I just. Why is he fighting an old man? What did the old man do to him? And then I didn't really participate much in Star Wars culture until about 8th grade. I got an Xbox, and I started playing the Battlefront games, the OG Battlefront games, when they actually released completed games, in the lost era of the past.
Before paywalls.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Like, hey, the code's in there. You just got to unlock it with this credit card.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would go home and play Battlefront every day and, just talk to my friends while I was playing it. And so I've got a lot of fond memories. And the first time I saw a Star Wars movie in theaters was with my dad. I didn't have any interest in going to see it, but, he had grown up on the OT. Right. And so he said, well, hey, I think this is the last one they're ever going to make. Let's go see it.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, cool. We don't really ever go to the movies. Let's do it.
Yeah. And
so we did. And I started to realize, oh, that little frog guy, he's actually a badass,
Mm-hmm.
and I instantly was drawn to Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know, I remember that being magical. And then watching the two final fights, you know, between Yoda and the Emperor and Obi-Wan and Anakin, for me, that was the pinnacle of cinema. In my 13-year-old brain was, oh my God, George Lucas is a genius. And then over the years, I went back and watched the other two prequels, and it was like, okay, he's still all right. You know, and really, the moment the product, I guess, the form of media that really made me fall in love with the idea of Star Wars and not just the movie franchise was the classic game Knights of the Old Republic.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I got so stinky because I didn't shower for like a week playing that game, and I was just like, how is this real? So, I mean, you know, and then for the new movies, the sequel trilogy to come out, you know, a lot of people hate on The Force Awakens because it's a soft reboot.
Yeah.
And I get that. You know, it does lack some originality, but in this era, you know, feeling goes a long way in film. And the feeling around and in that movie for me was perfect because it recaptured a lot of the whimsy that had been in the original trilogy. You know, when Han Solo and Chewbacca show up on the Falcon and Harrison Ford, who looks like he actually gives a shit for once, probably the first time in 10 years, you know, when he says we're home, like it made me tear up, you know. But then, you know, so after that came out, Caroline and I actually went to a Star Wars celebration down in Florida. And I had never been to any kind of convention. And, you know, if you've got the resources to make it happen, anyone out there listening, if you like Star Wars and you like talking about it and you like being around friendly people who just share some interests, go to a Star Wars celebration.
It's in Anaheim next year.
Yeah, it's in Anaheim next year. We're planning on going, you know, as long as nothing else comes up. But then, you know, I felt like Padme, you know, and I think I used that line in that comment that you talked about, Dom.
Yeah.
When The Last Jedi came out, I was like, Lucasfilm, you're breaking my heart. And then they forced with their hand-fisted script.
We will get into that a little bit more when we get onto the next bit.
I've rambled on long enough.
So when we get onto the next part where we talk about the you know what's gone, what's happened, the films that have come out and everything, we'll talk about that a little bit more then. But yeah, so that was basically your journey, your introduction into the series and things like that.
Right, my experience so far.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, well, I mean,
there was a lot better worded than mine was. There was a lot of
I feel really old now because listening to all your stories and your introductions, you're like, oh, I came in on the prequels and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, my mum took me to see Return of the Jedi at the cinema when I was 5 years old.
What?
So, like,
it's not your fault that you're like 80, Dom.
Cool.
It just makes me feel like I'm like, God, I'm the geezer in this conversation because yeah, I got to see not all of, but I got to see one of the original movies when it was playing in cinemas, in theaters. And that was my introduction to it. I mean, I think I was vaguely aware of something to do with this, you know, thing with these furry people and these robots and things like that when I was like at nursery school. You know, people would have had like lunch boxes and, you know, backpacks maybe with something Star Wars on, but I didn't really know everything about it because I was like 4 or 5 years old. But then I remember that when Return of the Jedi came out, obviously I was at the age where I could go. And growing up, it was, you know, to early years of my life, it was just me and my mum. And so it was that thing, you know, it was like mum and son trip to the cinema and we went to see Return of the Jedi. And I just remember falling in love with this. I mean, I had no clue what was happening because I hadn't really seen the other films, and I was just like, this is amazing. There's spaceships and lasers and there's guys, like say, with laser swords, and there's teddy bears. This film's got all these teddy bears in it. It's amazing. And, it was 5-year-old, I mean, people shit on the Ewoks a lot nowadays, but for a 5-year-old, it was magical. It was like, there are all these they're alive. They're teddy bears and they're alive and they're running around this forest and they've got traps and, look how awesome they are and stuff. And it was amazing, and like I said, I didn't really fully appreciate what I was watching until I started getting a bit older. But I just remember thinking, this is fucking awesome. This is, I love this, this is amazing. And then it just sort of snowballed from there. And it was like, as I got older, they would re-show the movies on TV, and I'd always be, Star Wars is on the TV. I've got to watch Star Wars, with my friends, and we'd watch it. And then I got a lot of the toys, and I had a lot of the original figures. And so I had, my cousin had a big bag of Star Wars figures. He had a Millennium Falcon, and he had AT-ATs, and he had TIE fighters, and he had, all these kind of things. And it was brilliant. And it was just like, whenever he'd come over, or I'd go over to his house, and he'll be like playing with all these things, because he was a few years older than me, so he'd been collecting them for a while, and it was just fantastic, and it just that spark, that fantastical world, and these amazing stories just grew with me as I grew up. And then obviously you go to the re-release, the remastered versions of the original trilogy. So then they come out at the cinema and I go and see all of them. So for the first time in my life, I'm able to go and see all 3 original Star Wars films in the cinema. And it was amazing. I was in what you guys would call high school, I went with my friends, there was no parents involved. It was like me and my friends would go to the cinema, and it's like, queuing up to get Star Wars tickets to see these remastered versions on the big screen for the first time ever was just fantastic. And then flash forward a little bit more, and it's like the announcements made about this, that there's going to be a prequel trilogy. Because in the interim years, I was, I became just obsessed with this whole world, and I read all these articles and I watched all these documentaries about how George Lucas had planned out a 9-part story, but he could only afford to make one, and the only one that would work under the budgetary constraints was what we now know as Episode 4, but which back then was just called Star Wars. And it was like, can you imagine what the rest of this story would be? What would the beginning be? How would it all begin? And how the origins of this story? How does Darth Vader become Darth Vader? And you hear all these little snippets, and the expanded universe obviously started building on that when the books came out.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, here's some of the stuff, the Lucas estate have allowed us to know a bit about what they had planned for the prequel movies. And so that's when we started learning bits about, the fall of Anakin and how he becomes Vader and stuff like that, which then years later we would get to see it play out on screen. My imagination was just fired with can you imagine if we ever got to see this happen? And then it happened. And then I went to see Episode 1, and I walked out of Episode 1 and went, really? It did not live up to the hype and the expectation that I think I had built up over the years. Now, don't get me wrong. I've watched that film numerous times since, and I wouldn't say it's a bad movie, but it's also not a great movie. And there is so much with it that I would change and I would tinker with. And I was just like, no, I didn't like this. I didn't like that. I mean, visually, it was stunning, getting to see things like when they went to the Gungan. Things like that. Visually, it looked amazing. But there were just things in it that were lacking that I was just like, I'm not on board with these things. I mean, the pod race sequence is phenomenal. It's an amazing bit of, cinema. The spectacle of it is great. It's sort of a throwback to the Roman chariot racing and, that kind of Spartacus type thing, but in a space setting.
Right, but it's like if you put SpongeBob in Spartacus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, visually it just looks pretty cool, you know, seeing all these weird and wonderful crafts whizzing along at ridiculous speeds, and then also, you know, the little geeky part of you that's kind of trying to catch a cameo in the background and go, oh, I recognize that alien. All right. Oh, did you see that? Oh, I'm sure they were Jawas. I'm sure that they were sand people and all this kind of stuff. And the geek, the Star Wars geek comes to the forefront, and then you forget about how crappy it is. And then you walk away and you go, no, it's crappy.
Right. The sense of betrayal sinks in as soon as you get away from the melting butter and popcorn.
Yeah, and then reality hits. You know, you walk out into the cold, stark daylight of you know, on the street when you come out of the cinema, and you're just gonna go, oh no. But it has its place, and I will defend the prequel trilogy now, because my view of it is that it tells a complete story. You know, we have got the complete canonical story now. Whether or not you think those movies are great, whether you think that, you know, 2 was better than 1 or 3 was better than the other 2, or, you know, whichever way round you look at it, those 3 movies have their place in the Star Wars canon. And yeah, did they blunder certain things? Could they have done things better? Could they have done things differently? Absolutely. But
not.
They're also part of, hey, shut up, you. You know, they're part of a whole. They're part of a whole 9-part story that was envisaged all those years ago. And here we are now on the eve of the 9th part of that story that a lot of people never thought was ever going to happen. We didn't think we were ever going to get to see all 9 movies. So that's my journey, you know, and along the way, you've got little things thrown in. Like I remember when I was in middle school, I went to Catholic schools, and one of the best things about, I don't know if you guys did, or, you know, what your backgrounds are, but like one of the best things about going to Catholic schools is when you get like special days, like Saints days. So the middle school I went to was St. John Bosco, and he has his own day. So it was great. So we had a day where we were off timetable. We didn't have any lessons. We didn't have to wear school uniform. We had games, and then we also had a movie, and they set up like a big projector screen in the hall, and we got to go and watch a movie, and we had, you know, we had sweets and fizzy drinks and things like that. And it was amazing. These are the perks of being brought up as a Catholic. You get all these treats. I was only ever in it for the treats.
It was a trap, Dom. They were trying to test people. They were trying to weed out people for gluttony.
It was a nice little Star Wars reference there with it. It's a trap. Where I remember seeing Caravan of Courage when I was in middle school, and because that's one thing I noticed that none of you guys mentioned was any of the ancillary movies, like the Ewok Adventure and Caravan of Courage.
Oh God, don't talk about the Ewok Adventure, please.
And then obviously we've got the other ancillary ones that we'll talk about shortly, like Rogue One and Solo. But back then you had the Ewok films, and I remember seeing that at school and thinking, again, teddy bears, this is amazing. You know, and it's like, I love it. There's these crazy bears, and I don't understand who these kids are and why they've got a caravan, and, you know, I don't really know how this has anything to do with Star Wars, but, you know, it does. That there's recognizable things in this. Is fantastic. And it's, I mean, you could say the same about the Christmas special. I mean, I'm not old enough to remember watching the Christmas special, but we all know about the Christmas special, the infamous Star Wars holiday special.
Greatest Star Wars movie.
I wouldn't dare search it because I'm afraid that like the CIA or FBI would come busting down the door like, hey, what the fuck were you looking for?
This is seen as porn in some countries.
Yeah.
Obscene content.
Yeah. This is less offensive to people than hardcore pornography.
Yeah. Especially with the female Wookiees and stuff. Oh.
Oh yeah. They're furries.
Have you seen, or are you aware of that thing, Jesse, the Christmas special?
Oh yeah, I'm aware of it. I've seen it.
You've seen it? Okay, fantastic.
No.
For the sake of this podcast, it's fantastic because it means we get to talk about all these things. Maybe for not your mental well-being and everything, it's not, but you know.
It took years of therapy.
Exactly. Intensive therapy. Mm-hmm. You'll get through it, Jesse. We promise.
One day you'll come out the other side.
Hopefully.
But yeah, so that's my journey. My journey is from going back to the actual original films. And for me, what was amazing as well, I suppose, is the fact that I was 5 when I went to see Return of the Jedi. And then when my daughter was 5, I got to take her to see The Force Awakens.
Oh, that is there's not even a word that I can choose for that. I mean, I want to say precious, but that doesn't convey it properly.
Boom, I win Star Wars. Thank you for joining me. Good night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
But no, you know, that to me was just, it's a nice little connecting circle. Like the fact she was the same age as I was when she got to see her first Star Wars film in the cinema, you know, it's just brilliant.
Right. And I mean, that's kind of what the whole series is based on is, you know, I mean, time moves in a circle and different generations of the Skywalker family find themselves wrapped up in similar conflicts. And
yeah,
I think that's one of the more beautiful and poetic things about it. And there's that parallel in real life where there's this magical moment where your parents, you know, like my dad and your mom and you went to see the original movies, and then they want to pass that on.
Yeah.
You know, they want to pass the magic on to us. And I mean, I hope I hope Disney hasn't run it into the ground by the time me and Caroline have kids, because I'd love to share that experience with them.
Yeah.
Dude, same.
So what was that like for you? You know, being able to see that spark in your daughter when you went to see The Force Awakens with.
It was kind of like going back to my first experience. It was like reliving it through her eyes and having that moment of like this fantastical world playing out on the big screen and seeing all these amazing creatures and all this exciting action and all these spaceships and things like that. And it was a really touching experience for me. And it was also one of those things, you know, that I felt so privileged to be able to pass on this fandom to her and get her to become a part of it, you know, and sort of say, this is the world that, you know, I've inhabited for years and I've loved these films for years. And it's like, here you go, see what you think. And then she loves them too. And obviously she's seen all of the films now. I haven't subjected her to the Christmas special or the Ewoks movies, but she has seen all the movies. And, you know, she loves them and she's watched some of the TV show stuff and things like that. And she's so excited for Rise of Skywalker. And it's that thing of like, it's made it even more of an event for me, because for me, it's an event because it's a culmination of all of these years of following this franchise. But it's also this exciting thing that it's like, it's something that I not only get to do for myself, but I get to experience with my daughter. You know, I get to see the end of this 9-picture story with her. So it makes it even more special for me.
Wow. That's awesome, man.
That's beautiful.
So yeah, so that's that. So I mean, that will allow that to sort of migrate onwards into talking about the next section, the next topic, which is what has gone already, what has happened. So tell me about because we've touched on bits and pieces here and there. We know Jesse is a prequel fanboy.
The Phantom Menace, 10 out of 10.
So okay, Jesse, so we'll go back around the table again, back to you, and tell me, in terms of your experience with Star Wars as a whole, like, you know, what are your highs, what are your lows, what are your best points? How do you feel about the division that's developed in the fandom? Your feelings about like things like, you know, how familiar are you with the extended universe, with the cartoon shows, and also with, you know, things like the games and stuff like that? You know, talk.
I mean, obviously, in my opinion, the original trilogy is the best trilogy. I don't think anybody's going to disagree with that, man. So there's really nothing you can say that I will say out of the 3 of them now. But the prequels, like I said, man, the prequels were the first ones that I actually got to see as they came out.
Yeah.
So they do hold a special place in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Over the years, I have realized how not great the first two in that trilogy are.
Yeah.
But Attack of the Clones is my favorite prequel movie. Just
Okay.
because Hayden Christensen is a fine-looking specimen in that movie.
He's a nice piece of ass.
Was it the Padawan, braid that did it for you?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yes. But man, and I remember watching The Revenge of the Sith when it first came out, and just seeing how beautiful that movie was, especially that very first battle where they're going after Grievous, and just being like, man, nothing can be better than this as far as a Star Wars movie. There's no way that, like, visually stunning, there's nothing that can beat it.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie completely wowed me, man. And the fight scene between Grievous and Obi-Wan was perfect. It was just an all-around amazing movie, and I think that's really where I kind of fell in love with the universe, because I always liked Star Wars, but I really fell in love with it watching that movie.
Yeah.
And to this day, that one, those Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith are, in my eyes, the greatest movies. But like I said, my opinion. But and then, of course, I said earlier, I watched the Clone Wars, and the Clone Wars was a huge part of my childhood, man. I played the game that really bad game that came out at the end of the series.
Yeah.
I had all the toys, man, all the action figures, man. It was just, I watched the movie. It was just, and hold on, I'm really bad with putting words together when I'm on the spot.
You're doing fine.
Yeah, no, you're doing great.
Yeah, man.
But, so that mid, more like, I guess, the mid to late, or 2000s was really where Star Wars, in my eyes, was like the best it could ever be. And I was like you after Revenge of the Sith. I thought, like, this is it. They're not making another one of them.
Yeah.
There's nothing else coming after this.
Mm-hmm.
And then all these years later, it was, what was that? Late 2015 when The Force Awakens first came out?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's late 2015. Me and Katie had actually just been dating for a few months at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, I was like, look, we have to go see The Force Awakens on Christmas.
Yeah.
And she had never watched a Star Wars movie before. And so when we went and did that, she fell in love with it. She doesn't watch the rest of the series, the rest of the saga. She won't watch anything that doesn't have Rey in it.
Really? Okay.
But and that right there, I think, is why I love The Force Awakens so much, because I have such fond memories with her.
Yeah.
And kind of introducing her into that series. And I will say that The Force Awakens was a really good movie, but I couldn't help noticing the similarities, and I understand it is a soft reboot between it and A New Hope.
Yeah.
And so that really made me kind of like question, well, how original is the story? Mm-hmm. And before this, The Last Jedi came out, I was really concerned because I was hearing all these things about, it's not going to be that great. They've got a new director on it, and I wasn't keeping up with all the hot topics surrounding the movie at that point. And so I went to see it, and I had these really low expectations for it.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually really enjoyed it, man, and I thought it was great. But one thing I will say is I wish they would stop making spinoffs, because I was not a huge fan of Solo. Solo was a huge letdown, and that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. And then they announced The Mandalorian, and I was like, oh God, it's going to be another terrible spinoff thing. Oh, God. Ooh. But I don't know, man. Like I said a while ago, I'm not good at putting words together. I have all these thoughts in my head that I want to say about it, but I can't form them into sentences.
Okay, let me ask you then. Let me try and make it a little bit easier. So you've talked about your, thoughts on the films and which one's your favorites and things like that. What about the expanded universe? Did you ever read any of the books or any of that kind of stuff? Did you ever delve into that rabbit hole, or did you?
No,
stick to the movies, the games, and the TV show. Did you watch Rebels or anything like that? Or
I never got a chance to watch Rebels, but about the book series and all the different books that came out, I will say this: I'm from Mississippi. We can't read. No, man, I've never really got because up until just a few years ago, I didn't even know that there was books or a comic book series. I didn't know anything about it, dude. Like when I found out that there was a comic book series, I was like, Star Wars?
Yeah.
In comics? I was really confused.
I'll tell you something interesting about the comics, because obviously we've had lots of different Star Wars comics over the years. I used to collect the original Marvel Comics run of Star Wars comics that they did back in the day, like back in the mid-'80s or something like that.
Yeah.
And because Marvel had the license for ages, because they did things like Transformers and they did G.I. Joe and, you know, all these other franchises. And then I don't know if they lost the rights or they just decided not to bother anymore. I think, you know, the passion around Star Wars kind of dipped a little bit after, you know, subsequent years after Return of the Jedi. I mean, there was those of us that, you know, we kept the faith for years, but the public at large, I think, sort of dipped a little bit and it became a bit more niche. So I think that's when, I mean, Nathan, or Caroline even might even know, did Marvel give up the rights and then Dark Horse took over or something like that around that time?
I'm not sure whether Marvel just let the rights run out, or maybe Lucasfilm was, LucasArts was like trying to renegotiate, but I'm not exactly sure what happened.
See, I like this format a lot better. I like being asked a question and then I can answer instead of me just having to come up with my own free-form thoughts.
Well, you did a good job with your free-form thoughts. That was fine. You sort of covered all the bases.
Freestyle off the top of the dome, man.
Well, we'll take the pressure off you, Jesse, and I'll move that same topic over to the other guys and tell me a little bit about your highs and lows and your least favorite and your most favorite and anything related to expanded stuff outside of the main film canon.
So, like I said earlier, my all-time favorite Star Wars media is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. I mean, there's just so many characters contained in that story that, to me, I'll never forget. Like, I'll never forget Darth Malak. I'll never forget either version of Revan or Bastila, Karth, and of course Mission and Zalbar. I mean, who doesn't like a big, tall dog companion? Yeah. What's not to love?
Oh yeah.
And a lot of the other video games I've got extremely fond memories of, like back when I remember prioritizing achievements on the 360. Mm-hmm. The first Force Unleashed was the first game that I ever got 100% of the achievements, and I remember thinking, like, all right, this is it. I've peaked. This is as pro gamer as I'm ever going to be.
That was a wonderful game.
Yeah, I love that game.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I remember reading, there was a Darth Vader book that came out after Episode 3, and I loved just reading him, like, tearing Jedi apart. And it's not because I dislike the Jedi. Man, this guy's suffering,
Yeah.
But I think one thing that me and Caroline shared, and experiencing it together was actually the Clone Wars.
Okay.
Because I didn't watch it when it first ran. My fandom wasn't quite as heretical or quite as fanatical.
Yeah.
Rather. And, I just stuck to like the video games. I played the MMO. Still good. But we actually watched the Clone Wars in its entirety about a year ago. And it's just breathtaking. I had always conceptualized it as this kid's show. But to look at it from an adult perspective, I mean, you get a lot of great insight, like Anakin Skywalker, who, if you just look at the prequel movies, he's kind of just an entitled prick,
He's a whiny boy.
Yeah, he's a whiny little bitch boy. But in the show, and you get glimpses of his heroicism. in episode 3, I think. You know, when he's dogfighting his way into Grievous' base and he's carrying Palpatine and Obi-Wan on his shoulder, but then he spends like the next 90 minutes, you know, crying and moaning, and you know, goes to this weird space opera with you know, his like surrogate father. Like, this is weird. But the Clone Wars, I really liked it. And Caroline, what was like your favorite thing from the Clone Wars?
I mean, if I can be 100% transparent, the Clone Wars is probably my favorite thing about Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
Like everything. I mean, we named one of our cats Ahsoka, for goodness sake. Like,
that's true.
I don't know. Something about it just really struck a chord with me. I feel like there's so much more emotion, and it just goes into depth with so many of the feelings that I hadn't even considered that they might be going through. And the backgrounds that some of them have, that it's like, oh yeah, I guess they would have to deal with that. I don't know. Just all of it really was like Ventress and everything, and like Darth Maul spider legs. It's like, what the fuck is going on? It was amazing. Like, I just kept going, there's no way this is a kid's show. Like,
well, and then it expands on the Force in such weird ways. Like, growing up, I was taught and learned, like, all right, there's just light side and dark side. And then you see these crazy witches.
Yeah.
And Mother Talzin's like, oh, yeah. And she's like, kind of got this voodoo vibe. And it's just, it expanded the universe so much more than I would have ever given it credit.
Because also, Clone Wars, it introduced the concept of like dark Jedi and things like that, didn't it? Like, I mean, it had already been sort of established a little bit in the expanded universe books, the idea that there were rogue sort of Jedi and stuff. But Clone Wars kind of, you know, built on that a little bit more, didn't it?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you really get to. On top of that, you see Anakin like slip into these moments of madness.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where the you know, March of the Empire starts to like swell, and you know, there's like a Darth Vader force cloud around him, and he's like choking people out, and just like, I mean, like Caroline said, another thing I really love about Clone Wars is it gives context where between 2 and 3 especially, we have none.
Yeah.
Like, if you just go cold from episode 2 to episode 3, you're like, wait, who's this robot dude? Why should I care what he does?
And like, I feel like it really gives us a chance to appreciate the clones of the Clone Wars. Like,
right. The people who are dying by the minutes.
Like, when I was younger and I kind of saw glimpses here and there of the prequels, I thought the clones were just robots. I didn't know that there were actually people in there. And to see the pain that they have to deal with, and they're just dying left and right. It was crazy. I was in tears a lot of that show.
Oh yeah, the Camino arc with I can't remember his name now. The kind of inbred clone where he's like, hey guys, I want to help.
Oh yeah. I can't remember what the character's name was though.
I think it was 99. It was just heartbreaking. He just wanted to help so badly.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing as well. A lot of people might have dismissed it because they were like, oh, it's animated, it's for kids. But in fact, there's a lot, I think, that isn't. You know, there's a lot of mature storytelling that runs through that series. And it gave them such a wide canvas to sort of say, this is a big period within Star Wars history. And we've got this long form series that, you know, we've got however many episodes it is per season that we can just flesh out and tell these longer stories that don't have to be told within a 2-hour window.
Right.
Yeah.
So it did sort of broaden and open the world of Star Wars up even further than it had been just purely based on the movies.
Right. And so I think that's why I mean, it's kind of a split decision for me personally. You know, I know Caroline's favorite is Clone Wars, but where my first impression was episode 3, you know, of course, Empire Strikes Back is the objectively best movie in the whole franchise. I'll go on record saying that.
Yeah.
But my personal favorite is actually episode 3, just because, I mean, especially now with the context from Clone Wars and watching seeing how close Anakin and Obi-Wan were, how gradual and painful the deterioration of their brotherly bond was. You know, it helps that there's these fan mashups.
Yeah.
I think the title of one is like Obi-Wan has PTSD.
Mhm.
And it's just a compilation of, you know, that was like a surrogate son to him.
Yeah.
And he had to basically kill him.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, do you think of what that would do on his psyche, you know?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And that's why we'll touch on this more later.
I know what you're going to say.
Very. But for me, my lowest point in Star Wars, and it's a divisive opinion, I debate with people a lot about it. I felt so betrayed by not by Star Wars as a whole, but by Disney Star Wars when The Last Jedi came out. You know, and Mark Hamill had even tried to warn us in interviews, like, this is not the Star Wars you remember or that you love. This is some egghead shaped motherfucker. He got writer and director. Like, come on, I mean, somehow. I just don't understand when you have in your own tent house, you know, where they've got Marvel and it's run by a committee. They're just going to give some dude who is mostly untested full reign over arguably one of the 9 most important movies in a whole, like, franchise. Like, and you know, I'll speak to some criticisms that I've received that I thought were fair, you know, because there's a character assassination of Luke Skywalker in my mind, because, you know, he goes from being the most optimistic person in the galaxy. I mean, he finds out that his dad is basically Hitler, and he's like, nah, he's still good, though.
Yeah.
You know, like, despite his dad kind of actually being Hitler, you know, he still believes I can redeem him with the power of family and love and the Force. I can help bring him back. And he does. Like, he could have killed him, but he recognized, wait, family is stronger than that. And even just the tradition. And so for Luke to cast off the Force at whole, like, I get it. You know, the one criticism that I think is fair is, you know, he's just taking a play out of the old Jedi Master playbook by running away when shit gets hard. Because you look at Obi-Wan Kenobi, my favorite character, Yoda. Well, when things start falling apart at the end of episode 3, what do? They run away. Defeated, they run away. And so I get that, but those guys didn't fall out of touch with the Force. And Luke, he just becomes like some grumpy old man. Like, I get it, and that's awesome. But, I mean, it's especially considering we see in the movie that Yoda's just kind of been hanging out with, you know, Luke on this island all these years. How is he not... I don't find it believable that Luke would fall so far. And furthermore, going back to the family thing, his nephew, you know, he saved Space Hitler from being Space Hitler. But he starts to get one whiff of, oh boy, I don't know, I think my nephew, he dipped into some bad juju. I better just fucking kill him. Like, no, dude, no. Like, so before I get too much more wound up, I'll leave it at that. My biggest problem with The Last Jedi being the assassination of Luke Skywalker's character.
Okay, fair enough. And Caroline, have you got any further bits to add to that? To any of that?
Oh gosh, I could go on and on about The Last Jedi, but aside from that, I didn't get much into a lot of EU stuff. Really like The Force Awakens. I liked the Last Jedi the first time I saw it, and then upon reviewing, didn't like it that much. There's parts of it that I'm like, yeah, and I can see both sides of the argument pretty fairly, I'd say, but it wasn't what I wanted.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, my sort of experience with all these kind of things is, you know, I touched on mine a bit more in the beginning section. I also, you know, I'd sort of dipped through the EU. So what's it known as now, though? It's not, because it's sort of been cut apart from.
It's called
is it Legends?
now.
Is it
Yeah.
Legends? Yeah. But I read a few books over the years. I read, what was interesting for me as well is the. I mean, we'll talk about this a bit more when we start talking about the trailer for Rise of Skywalker. But like, I read the Dark Empire series and all of the books that came out that were set after Return of the Jedi, and they dealt with the return of Palpatine and stuff to do with clone bodies and how Palpatine had figured out ways to cheat death and trying to corrupt Luke and turn Luke to the dark side and all of this kind of stuff, and like, I read all of those books. So I've got some history with that sort of expanded universe stuff. As I mentioned before, I used to collect some of the comics. I used to watch the Droids TV cartoon from years ago. I used to love that. And the Ewoks cartoon. I used to really like the Ewoks cartoon. I don't know if any of you remember that.
Bits.
That was great. I used to love the theme tune to that. It was so funky. But yeah, a lot of mine as well with the games. Like, I remember really enjoying the Rogue games on Nintendo. So like the Rogue Leader, Rogue Squadron, those games were really, really fun to play. And I just remember because I can't remember whether, I think it was Leader was on the N64 and Squadron was on the GameCube. Or it may be the other way around. I can't remember. But playing the one on the N64 and thinking, this is great. This is so exciting. I'm really enjoying this. And obviously, bearing in mind, N64 also had Episode 1 Pod Racer as one of the games. Yeah, that was interesting.
That was put very diplomatically.
Yeah. But then when the GameCube came out and the Star Wars game came out with it, and I was just blown away because at the time it just looked phenomenal, and I'm just like, wow, it looks like the movies, and it's got all these full motion video cutscenes and all of this stuff. And it was like, this is the Star Wars game I've been waiting for. Because I remember playing Super Star Wars and Super Return of the Jedi and Super Empire Strikes Back on the I would call it the SNES. You guys say the SNES, but
the proper way to say it.
Playing those. We're not going to get into that conversation. This is about Star Wars. We had all those games back then, and I remember finding them tremendous fun to play, and then getting to see again the evolution of Star Wars games as the technology of consoles has got better. And obviously, I dipped into, Knights of the Old Republic and a few other bits and pieces along the way, a few little sort of spin-offy games and things like that. And then now, obviously, I kind of missed the two Battlefront games, the two recent ones. I mean, I know, Jesse, obviously you've been playing it a bit with Skippy, but for me, I've not had the opportunity. I had a bit of hands-on when I worked in a game store. I played a bit of Battlefront 1. I don't really have enough hands-on time with it to pass too much judgment on it. It was fun enough what I did at the time, but I have issues with the whole microtransactions thing and stuff like that. But that's a whole other conversation.
Dead on arrival.
Yeah.
But I will, to address that point, though, I do think it's important, because it's a live service game. I loved the first Battlefront. I mean, I acknowledged that it was a weak entry. They were just cashing in on, okay, let's get this out before The Force Awakens. I still had fun with it, loved the DLC. For the second one, the public outcry was so much that they couldn't ignore it that time. And in the time since its release, it's actually become quite a good game.
Oh, it's great. I love it. I play it almost every weekend.
And I mean, they've added a lot of very expansive maps and even new game modes and things like that, and great characters and character design. I mean, I want to give credit to the second game because it transformed itself from this ugly thing on release to what I think is legitimately a good game now. But it's a shame that horrid release will always hang over it.
Yeah. Like I say, for my, personally, I never really got much chance to play either of those games. I'm hoping that I'll get the chance to play the new one. It may not be for a while. I might not get, like a lot of people, I won't be able to get it when it comes out. But I'm hoping that I'll get to play it at some point in the not too distant future. We'll talk about that again because I'll throw that in with the what's to come from Star Wars. But
Right.
we'll talk about that, the new game, a little bit more there. In terms of my favorite film in like the canon and stuff like that in Star Wars, I would have to say, obviously, my favorite film is Spaceballs. That's the best Star Wars film ever.
To the hut, dude.
I mean, maybe it's tied a little bit with Blue Harvest or something Dark Side.
Oh,
yeah. I mean, in terms of all the film, I would have to say I'm gonna go off script completely here and say that Return of the Jedi is always going to be my favorite, I think, because it was my first ever Star Wars film. So, Jesse saying about, sentimental thing, and obviously Caroline saying about Attack of the Clones and things like that, it's like, it holds a special place in my heart because of that was the beginnings of my fandom. But I really like Rogue One. I think Rogue One is a fantastic war movie.
Oh, yes.
I think
complete.
It's really, really good, gritty, dark story within this world that we know that is somehow very familiar but also very different at the same time, and how it added so much extra layers and context to how we come into A New Hope, like the things that transpired leading into it and the questions that were never really answered that we finally got the answers to as a result of Rogue One. And I just think it was a really, really well put together and really well made film.
That's why Solo was such a letdown for me, man, because I really enjoyed one, and I was like, okay, these spinoffs are going to be something really great. And then Solo came out. I'm not saying it was a bad movie, but it was a bit of a disappointment for me.
No, you were right. It was a bad movie. It was the Star Wars film that nobody asked for.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was the problem with it. And I think that, they destroyed some of the mythos and some of the sort of legacy and things of the character of Han Solo because of the things that they did in that film, in my opinion.
But damn, was he handsome.
Like all of these things that make him who he is, it's like, oh, I wonder how that came to be. Oh, Wookiee companion? Yeah, somebody just gave it to him.
Yeah.
His name? Somebody gave it to him.
His iconic blaster? Somebody gave it to him.
Oh, yeah, and guess what, guys? I know we never mentioned this ever before, but the ship? Yeah, the ship's got, like, a person, like a sentience. Like, it was a being first, and then it got put into the Millennium Falcon. Oh, you never saw that coming, did you? Yeah, exactly.
Your
did not like that.
It was wonderful.
It was amazing.
Oof. Yeah, big yikes.
Yeah. There was just so many things. The only thing I think that is redeemable and cool in any way, shape, or form is the last 2 minutes of Solo.
I thought you were going to say Emilia Clarke.
No. The last 2 minutes.
She's dreadful.
I mean, you all know what happened in the last 2 minutes, obviously, don't you?
Are we talking about the cameo?
We're talking about the reveal. The fact that they made expanded universe stuff and animated stuff and things. They made that into canon in film by having Darth Vader.
That's right.
All as the crime syndicate leader.
Yep.
Yeah, very happy about that, especially coming out of Clone Wars. I mean, woo!
Yeah, I want to talk about that a lot more when we start talking about the future.
Mm-hmm. There's some things I think we could talk about in relation to Darth Maul. I've got a few things as well. But that for me, that was probably the highlight of that whole movie, was the fact that they brought back Darth Maul and they sort of they acknowledged the things. That was the point. I think they'd done it a little bit with the odd little nod here and there in the live action movies, and then obviously by bringing Forrest Whitaker's character in Rogue One. Obviously, he was in the Clone Wars, wasn't he?
Yep.
And you kind of go, suddenly this guy is an animated character, and now he's a real person, and that established how much of canon the animated shows were. So then to do the same with Darth Maul was fantastic. And it looks like they're doing it again. Obviously, the ship from Rebels was in Last Jedi, and you can see it in the trailer.
One of the members of the fleet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's a whole bit in Force Awakens. There's the bit over the Tannoy system.
Oh, cool.
Where they're calling out some of the characters that were members of what's the ship called again? It's the Ghost, isn't it?
Yeah, Ghost and oh shoot.
I know it's right on the tip of my tongue.
Wow, I feel bad for not knowing that other one because I play the Star Wars every day. I should know that.
Yes, he does.
You play what every day? Sorry, say that again.
Phantom.
Yeah. Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. I should have also noted that was one of my highlights.
Forgot that.
You know,
okay.
Operative phrase being was. It's kind of.
Yeah.
Oh, the glory has spoiled.
But yeah, it's the fact that these things are coming into the live action sphere now is pretty exciting. But yeah, so Solo trash apart from those last couple of minutes, but Rogue One was just genius. And it would just have been nice to see other films if they'd done, I mean, because there was plans for other spin-offs that have now all been cancelled and things have morphed into different projects and things like that. But if they'd all been in the same sort of vein and the same care and attention had gone on them as Rogue One, then I think that we would have probably been a lot happier than we ended up being once we got the abomination that was Solo.
So the question is Solo the bottom of the barrel for Star Wars in your opinion?
Yes, because this is where I will get controversial. And I will say, like, obviously, The Last Jedi. So I accept there are many, many things wrong with that film. I never have once said that it's a perfect Star Wars film by any shape of the imagination. There are a lot of things I'm unhappy with. Like you said, Nathan, the fact that this sort of character assassination and neutering of Luke Skywalker is something that I was not on board with. I feel that they really went this heavy-handed, this sledgehammer approach of like, let the past die, forget about everything, was basically saying, yeah, it was like, fuck your fandom, this is a new beginning for Star Wars. And I did not appreciate that because I was like, no, I've been, I understand you're trying to market this for a younger, new generation now, but don't alienate those of us that have kept this going for all these years.
Yeah.
Right. This is the Disney, the C with the circle around it, copyright brand of Star Wars, and they're kind of just like you said, they're rebranding. If they wanted to completely reshoot the OT to just Disney-fy it, they're halfway there. Because they've got a young Han Solo and a young Chewie. Yeah. Hey, he already showed up in a movie. Oh, this is just fun, right? No, it's not. Fuck off.
I mean, the thing is as well, I have mixed feelings about a lot of the stuff in that film because, and I think again, this ties into my daughter because when we went to see Last Jedi when it came out in the cinema, and she absolutely loved it because she enjoyed all of the spectacle, and like the Carrie Fisher bit was like, I mean, that for her was obviously like, that was like a Mary Poppins moment, which I know a lot of people crapped all over, but for an 8-year-old girl seeing this princess who is now this leader and stuff, like knowing that from her knowledge of the story that, Leia's got force powers, but we've just never really seen them exhibited, to get to see it play out on the screen was like a real, wow, this is amazing sort of moment. She looked at me with so much like big grin on her face, like, she's not dead, she's used the force, this is amazing, and it was like, it was such a cool moment because of how it impacted her.
Right, it was a very wholesome experience.
And so that for me made that moment something when people were going, oh, and it was really stupid, and she Mary Poppins back into the ship, and we've never seen any evidence that Leia had any force training and this, that, the other. And I was like, fuck off, my daughter liked it. So
hey, now that kind of reasoning I can get
behind that.
But so there were other things in it. I mean, like, I loved the Porgs. I thought they were cute. I loved the scene with Chewie and the Porgs with the whole, I'm going to eat one of you. Oh no, now I feel really guilty. Stop looking at me. Why are you looking at me? Stop looking at me. Fuck you. I'm not going to eat you. Like those little bits. And I mean, I did like the scene. I like the scene when Luke appears and he has his moment with Leia and he walks out there like a boss and faces down against the whole of the First Order. And you're just like, Luke is going to go show now that he is the baddest motherfucker in the galaxy.
But then he's
Yeah,
not there.
exactly.
And then they pulled the old bait and switch, and then you go, God damn it! You know, it's like,
Yeah, exactly. They pull the rug out from under you, and they're like, "Gotcha, bitch."
yeah. And like the thing with Snoke, like I was really invested in finding out what's the deal with Snoke. Is he a reincarnation of the Emperor?
Yeah.
Is he gonna be Darth Plagueis? You know, are we gonna get all this kind of stuff? There was so much investment, and then Rian Johnson came along and went, Snoke, yeah, fuck that guy, you know, and they just like killed him off. And I was just like, how am I ever supposed to get invested in anything ever again if you just tell me everything is disposable?
Right. Well, and it's like he dies. He's supposed to be. He's set up by JJ in episode 7. Is like, all right, this is going to be the big bad. And so, you know, and there's plenty of criticism to levy against JJ for setting it up so vaguely. But at the same time, to just come behind and like kill the big bad it's disrespectful, frankly.
Yeah.
Because he dies in the most typical villain way. He's monologue how awesome he is.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yes, Kylo Ren, I see inside your mind. And he doesn't see that he's about to kill him.
Yeah.
Like, no, this dude was reaching out across the galaxy to connect Kylo and Rey. But he just lets his apprentice, like, you know,
cut him in half.
Yeah, he gets Darth Mauled by his fucking apprentice. Like, no, that's some weak shit.
Yeah, and I mean, see, the other thing though is that as much as I hated that moment, and obviously I said my feelings about it a minute ago, and I agree with your sentiments as well. But at the same time, I also really liked it because we didn't see it coming. You know, the fact is, he was set up to be the villain. And then when he got killed like that, I was like, shit, that was a twist that I never saw coming. I never thought that was going to happen. Or I thought it was going to be, they thought they killed him and then he was going to, like, his body was going to come back together and he's going to laugh. And it would be like, oh, shit, they can't kill him, you know. So I liked the fact that I like it in films when they do stuff that they go in a direction where you sort of are predicting, I know how this is going to go, and then it goes off another way, and you go, "Whoa, that was amazing!" Because I didn't guess that was going to happen. But at the same time, it was like annoying as well. So it was like a mixed bag of. I had mixed emotions, and that was my feelings in general about The Last Jedi. Was that there are certain moments, there are certain scenes, there are certain bits that happen in the film that I absolutely loved. You know, like I say, I loved Luke walking out there like that. I loved the bit with Carrie in space. I loved the bit that a lot of people bitched about, which was the idea of like warping into the First Order ships, like jumping into them, going to light speed and stuff. And it's like that was brilliant because nobody's ever done that before, and it was something we'd never seen, and it looked fucking awesome. And they did it with no sound, which would be the case, you know, and all this stuff.
And I'll never take away the cinematography strength of the film, and that's what I can say about all the movies, you know, Disney era, is that they're gorgeous and competently shot. But to go back to The Last Jedi, you know, I think, you know, if you're familiar with Breaking Bad, you know how Mike is talking to Walter, and he's like, he tells the story about this domestic abuse case that was a repeat, and he took a half measure, and then the woman died, right? Yeah. Like, you never do a half measure. And I feel like a lot of the stuff in The Last Jedi was a half measure.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you look at the marketing with the trailers and stuff, you know, kill the past. You know, like I said, take the hammer to the past.
Yeah.
And there's so many half-ass ways that they attempt to do that, but then they totally, you know, undermine it. So, like, killing Snoke, it could have been good, right? Because then they fight together, they kill those Praetorian guards, you know, and that's pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that whole moment in the throne room with them two working together and stuff like that, because that was the whole, you know, going back to the expanded universe stuff. I thought we're going to see a third way. You know, we're not going to see the light, we're not going to see the dark, we're going to get to see like the grey Jedi. You know, this is going to be the middle path where they balance both the dark and the light.
Right.
and use them in conjunction. And maybe that's what we're seeing the birth of here with Rey and with Kylo.
Well, and that's why I think it's a half measure, because as branding is, advertising itself as something radically different.
Yeah.
Right? When Darth Vader, Kylo Ren asks Luke Skywalker, Rey, whatever her name is, to join him, she does essentially the same thing. Kill the past. Like, I don't know. It seems like you're trying to do something. You're trying to like run the same path, but in a really weird way. Like, honestly, and I don't know how other people feel about this, but I would have loved it if Rey had joined Kylo.
I agree.
Because that would be so different. That would have blown my mind.
And it would have been one of those twist things that you never saw coming.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I would have loved that.
And then this old, disconnected from the Force Luke Skywalker has to find his way around two very powerful Force emergents, or like find some sort of compromise, like you're saying. And then it would have been totally like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking about the movie later and thinking, well, what do I have to look forward to? Rey has already kicked Kylo's ass twice now. And that's cool, but as far as like the narrative goes, I didn't have an idea of like, okay, what should I be excited about?
And that is a really good way to segue into the next part of this conversation, where we talk about what is coming very soon and our thoughts on the trailers and things like that, so that we can get into this part of the conversation. So that was nicely done there, Nathan.
Very nicely done there, Nathan.
Again, I will credit.